Yeah, perfect. All right, I'm gonna refresh YouTube.
So it's just about to go up.
Yeah,
just as like a little timing thing, there's about a 15-second delay, 15-second delay. So don't worry about that.
Oh, that's gonna be awkward. Watching myself 10 seconds delayed.
Yeah.
I'm slow enough as is.
I find that horrible when you're when you're on a Zoom call or someone has that delay in the background. You can hear yourself and you're just like, oh my God.
Yep. So we're up and going. I'm just going to quickly check with Haley. It's all good.
Ran into another one of your employees on actually no, he's just left on Sunday at my cousin works for Xero, and it was her daughter's party, 3-year-old birthday party. Edmundo, I can't remember his name. He was like something to do with a product anyway. He was saying he's like, oh, I know Luke. Or I was like, oh, you're gonna miss our webinars. He's just gone to, is it Atlassian?
Atlassian.
Yeah,
it's a good company. What was his name? Ed. Okay.
Let me just double check. I've shut everything down so that I don't.
I might need some lighting tips in this cottage from you guys for the next one. So it says there's 4 people watching now. So are you able to switch it off now, or we'll just keep it running?
Just keep it running, I'd say.
Okay, sweet.
Let's not tempt fate.
I'm gonna turn it off because it's super distracting hearing myself and the lag. All right, you're on mute now, James.
I was just going to say, having the sound on in the background is like when you call the radio station and then you got the radio on in the background.
Yes. Have you ever dialed into ZB? I've always wanted to dial into Talkback just to see what that was like.
Oh, this is on the record, eh? You saying that's live on YouTube. You do realize that, hey?
Yeah. For those that are watching the recorded version of this, or have just joined us, hello, we will start the webinar in a few minutes. You've just got to deal with a little bit of banter between the 3 of us until then.
His name is Armando, actually.
Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, I know him. When you're listening to radio and you can hear someone who's dialed in who didn't think about muting the radio before they went through, and they're just really struggling to get their thoughts out over the sound of their voice on the radio.
Or that like feedback loop that they get where it just screeches.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few people joining us. Hello, everybody who's slowly coming on. We will start the webinar in a few minutes. How's that ice mocha mic hitting the spot?
I've just hit the chocolate, so it's going well.
Life's good.
Yeah.
I actually missed my window to go grab a coffee, so that's on the agenda after this.
Yeah.
How do you have a baby?
I've given up on ordering anything that reasonably resembles a coffee now. I'm like, I'll just take an iced mocha. Like at some point, I'm just going to go, you know what? Just give me a milkshake and let's be done with this. Like,
it was the only thing you could order in Auckland with the humidity last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit chillier this morning.
Yeah, it's nice that the humidity's gone, actually. Real nice.
Yep.
Oh, so good. I actually underdressed coming into the cottage this morning. It was quite cold.
That's the most Auckland thing you've said.
Yeah.
I'm underdressed.
I was talking to a colleague. I was born in Gore, and one of my colleagues is born in Invercargill, and we were both complaining about how it was a bit nippier yesterday after the humidity. Like we've gotten a bit soft.
Yeah, it's funny when you say you're from Gore because you're the least Gore person I would know.
Yeah, I always, when people ask me where you're from and I say Gore, I say, can't you tell? And then I say, all good things come from Gore. It's a lot of good people.
That's a statement.
I've
never been to Gore.
It's the metropolitan of the South, guys. You have to go visit.
Right. For those that have joined us, we'll just give it a minute or two for Luke to continue talking about his Gore roots, and then we'll crack into the webinar.
Well, James, half of you're an honorary Invercargill citizen now, man.
I'm married into Southland.
Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah.
There you go.
But Luke's just going to go for a ski after this. He's just enjoying some time at the lodge.
Mount Panorama and Whistler,
Yeah, I think I always need to clarify, just for those who are tuning in, that I'm not in Owakuni or Whistler. This is just my cottage out on the deck in sunny Auckland. How many people do we have in there, James? Should we start?
22.
Okay, we got 22. Maybe we'll give it one more minute and then we'll kick into it.
Yep. Sounds good.
Cool.
Maybe just to make sure that people can hear us and we're not talking to ourselves, can you give the video a like, just so we know that you're there and you can hear us and it's all sounding okay?
It's always a good idea.
Yeah. If no one could hear us, it'd just be 40 minutes of extreme hand gesturing from me. It'd be, James gives me a lot of stick because I gesticulate when I talk, and he's like, mate, you need to keep that under control.
All right, Luke, we've got some likes. We've got 31 people on this. Do you want to give us, so you're a hype man, do you want to give us the introduction of a lifetime, and then we'll get the show on the road?
Luke Buffer.
Great. I will be your hype man today, guys. So yeah, kia ora to the Xeros who are tuning in or who will watch us on recording. So happy Tuesday, the most productive day of the week, fun fact. But welcome to this week's 3-part webinar series in partnership with Lighthouse Financial. So we've had really great demand for these webinars, and I don't know whether it's a combination of we just don't have enough work on, or everybody's just freaking out after the new year around money matters, or you're all really motivated and have some goals in place, and this is a good place to start. But the purpose of these webinars is just to help you make more informed decisions really about your financial future. And so we've got Lighthouse with us. They're a full financial services firm with accountants, mortgage brokers, and financial advisors. And so James and Mike, who I'll hand over to shortly, they're both financial advisors with over 20 years experience combined. And outside of their day-to-day of helping their clients achieve their goals, James and Mike are passionate about helping Kiwis take control of their financial future. The way I see James and Mike as their fresh faces to an industry that needs some youth, and I really relate to the content that they're putting out. I really like the way that they break down explaining financial markets, explaining investing, explaining different matters that really make up your financial position. And so one way that they do that is through webinars like today, and also through their podcast Checks and Balances, which I think has over 3,000 listeners each month. If I got that right, guys. So check that out.
3,000 VPNs of Mike and our mums helping us out.
Of course it is. A few bots thrown in. So we're in good company because Mike and James, they've done these types of series with other businesses like Rocket Lab, Russell McVeigh, Simpson Grierson, WSP, to name a few. So we're in good company. And yeah, I think we'll get a lot. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you both. And yeah, first topic of today is first home buyers. Just a shout out to the other ones that are coming up. We've got the mid-career planning and then also investing 101 on the Thursday. So make sure that you register for those if you aren't already. So Mike and James, I'll hand over to you. Thanks so much for setting this up.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Luke. Well, I will demote you from being a host.
I love the limelight. Thanks.
There you go. You're gone to us. Awesome. Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Luke. It's almost like we wrote it ourselves. So Mike and I are very happy to be with you today. So my name is James Blair. I'm a financial advisor. I'm also the Director of Wealth here at Lighthouse. I'm joined by the incredibly capable, my own personal mortgage broker, and the person who is going to be the center of attention today, Michael Vincent, mortgage broker. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah, I do a lot of talking in this one, but James is there to break it up and provide some sprinkling of hype. So it should be good.
Yeah. So today is the first of 3 webinars that we're running. So today is all about buying your first home. Prices keep going up. It's getting harder to get a mortgage. Mike's going to talk you through the process. We're also going to touch on some other points as well. Tomorrow, we're running a webinar on paying down debt and creating wealth. So maybe for those more in sort of the middle of their career. And then Luke's also told us investing 101. So Mike's going to talk about NFTs for 45 minutes. No, I'm joking. We're going to talk about some basics of investing as well. I think that one's on Thursday.
Yeah.
So the structure of today is Mike and I are going to talk for probably about 40 minutes, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. Use that live chat function on YouTube. Pop in the comments as you go. If you've got a question, we'll tackle them at the end, and we will do as much Q&A as you've got. We've got nowhere else to be. If you need to run off 10 minutes after the Q&A, no worries. Off the back of today, we will do a couple of things. One is we will send a recording. Obviously, this is stuck on YouTube forever, so you can come back here as well, but we'll send you the Zoom recording. Second thing we'll do is we'll send you a survey to let us know 1 minute how you found today. And the final piece is we'll send you a link to book a one-on-one session with us if you want to have a chat, most likely more on Mike's side today, if you want to talk about your own personal situation. One thing that happens in the comments and the questions is, hey, hypothetically, say I'm 28 years old, have this income, this is what my partner earns, what should I do? That's too hard for us to do in a group setting. So that's why you get the chance to do the one-on-one sessions. So a little bit about Lighthouse before we get into it. Why should you listen to us? So we're based on High Street in the middle of the city in Auckland. Pretty much our purpose as a business is securing your financial future. So for us, that means buying long-term assets, thinking long-term, not short-term. We believe compounding interests are the greatest thing in the financial universe. And that's really what we're about. We're all about planning long-term, thinking long-term, and implementing a plan over time. So we've got all the parts to be able to do that for our clients. We've got accountants, mortgage brokers. We set up trusts. We're experts in property. The wealth piece, we build our own investment portfolios. We give advice on KiwiSaver, life insurance, income protection, budgets, kind of the whole shebang.
Cool. So as James sort of alluded to just there, throughout this webinar, we'll be giving you general advice. Now, absolutely, if you want personalized advice, just come and book a time with us. We're happy to do that. But please keep in mind that this isn't personalized advice. We are just talking in general terms. If you do want to discuss your situation, book a time to sit down with us. Like James said, eventually, the questions will get to, if I'm 28, earn this, can I do this? What can I do this? That's personalized advice. We need to know a lot more about your situation before we hand that out. Cool. So the agenda for today, we'll run through setting goals and budgeting, because if you want to buy a house, you need to have those goals in place, and the budgeting is going to be able to get you there. We'll talk about KiwiSaver a little bit. Great tool for first home buyers. James will run you through some options. I'll talk about some of the conditions that you can use KiwiSaver under. The home buying process. Now, this is quite a chunky block to get through. It seems like a really easy concept. You get the money, you buy the house, you get a mortgage, it's all done. There are 1,000 different things that can go wrong during that process, and there's a lot to actually understand about buying a house. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of a couple of ways that you can buy a house and things to sort of look out for. Please just throw questions in that chat function, and I'll cover them all off at the end. And when James says we'll answer questions for as long as you keep asking them, I think we did like an hour and a half of questions with some of the Rocket Lab guys. So really just throw them in there, and I can cover off any points that are a bit more detailed. We'll also talk about insurance. you need to cover this when you're looking for a mortgage application now. So James is going to talk about that a bit too. Cool. So why do we do this? 46%, a pretty big stat. That is the number of Kiwis who are unsure about their financial future. And again, it does look pretty big, but if you think about it, if school doesn't teach you about this, if your parents don't teach you about this, how will you know what is the right and wrong financial decisions to make and what's going to get you sort of ultimately to your goal? 826,000, another stellar number. That was the median house price in New Zealand last year. You know, it looks big. It's only going to get bigger. So we always try and get our clients onto the property ladder as soon as possible. How big is it going to get? So this is in 10 years' time with a growth rate of 5%. The median house price in New Zealand will be 1.35 million. Now, again, this looks like a really big number, and obviously it is 10 years down the line, so you'll get inflation and wage growth that will track that too. But I hope this just highlights the importance, again, of getting on the property ladder as soon as you can.
Okay, so where to start? The first thing is, I assume if you are on this webinar, you do not own a home, or you are on this webinar for somebody who you think is going to buy a home soon. So the first thing to do when thinking about buying your first home is setting some goals. And that might be very obvious, but if you don't put it out into the universe, if you don't write it down on paper, if you don't create clear, smart actions to be able to get you there, you're kind of just, you know, making your way through, hoping something will land at some point, and that is not the way we do things. So setting goals are really broken into three parts. The long-term objective, what are the steps that need to happen, and then breaking it down into a day-to-day, what does that look like from paycheck to paycheck? So we will talk about setting goals in lots of different ways. We look at money just a different topic. We look at money in terms of fund tokens. It's not about how much you've got. It's not about, you know, squirreling away and building up as much as possible. It's about what do you need to do to achieve the lifestyle you want, to achieve your purpose, to get you where you need to get to. So setting goals. Talking about buying a house, let's start by saying how much you're going to spend on a house and when are you going to buy it. Seems pretty obvious, right? Actually think about those two things. And if you're a little while away, you might go, oh, I don't know if I could do it. Maybe it's not achievable. Put them out, write them down, break it down. So for example, let's say you want to buy your first home and it's going to cost you $1 million. Mike still tells me you can get 10% deposits in some situations. Yep. This is recorded. There you go. 10% deposit approved for you. So 10% of $1 million is $100,000. So then you've got to think about, well, $100,000, that's a lot of lettuce. Where am I going to get that from? How am I going to achieve that goal? Maybe you might say, well, I want to achieve that goal over 3 years. So let's say you've been contributing to KiwiSaver for a while, you're in the right fund. We've projected out that your KiwiSaver balance might be $50,000 over 3 years. That means you have another $50,000 still to save over a 3-year period. So $50,000 over 3 years, if my math is right, Mike, I don't know why I don't pick round numbers. It's about $16,000 a year that you need to save. If you get paid on a monthly basis, what are we talking about? $1,300 a month, maybe $600 a paycheck, somewhere in that sort of mark. Now, if you work that backwards to the $600 a paycheck and you're like, hold up, inflation is out there, life is expensive, I can't achieve $600 a paycheck. You need to readjust your goal, either a cheaper house or a longer period to achieve it. And that's why setting those goals and breaking it down is a really important starting point.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of things outside of your control as a first home buyer. The main one, which is very painful, is bloody prices keep going up, and that hurts a lot. But you need to think about what's within your control. The first thing that's within your control is having a plan and setting goals like I've spoken about. The next really important piece is, well, if I need to save $600 a week, what's the best way to do it? Now, some people might be using Xero to track all of their expenses and budget. And if you are, that's great. Mike and I worked for a bank with our mate Luke for a long time. And we know that just because you work in an industry where there's a lot of stuff focused around money, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're on top of your financial situation. So if you've got a budget that works really well for you, that's great. But when we think about budgeting, if you're struggling a little bit, is we like to keep it super simple, keep it automated, and also sustainable. You know, Mike loves his avocado on toast. He loves going out for brunches and dinners. He needs to make sure he can maintain the lifestyle that he is accustomed to. So if you're struggling in terms of how to set a budget, I would say I love thinking about the 3 mason jars. So your fixed expenses, your fun, and your savings. The only jar that's getting you anywhere is that 3rd jar. So if you need to save, in the example I gave before, $600 a paycheck, that would be going into that savings jar. So the first thing you need to work out is, what is your cost of living? What are your fixed bills? You then need to think about, well, what does your lifestyle look like? What things will you prioritize and enjoy? And then you've got your savings to the side. So you get paid, it gets automatically split into those 3 bank accounts. And when you run out of fun money, you don't dip into the savings jar. This is for you, Mike. You don't dip into the savings jar to keep your fun going. You work out how much your lifestyle is and keep to the plan.
Yeah, and I think a really important point there is the automated piece. Look, set up automatic payments, have different bank accounts, keep these things physically split up. If it helps, have the savings jar or the savings account at another bank, so you can't just instantly dip into it all the time. The more you see the funds, or the more you have to manually make these transfers, the more likely you are to look at this and go, savings is looking good, might have a bit more for fun this month. And those are the sort of things that over time will sort of deviate you off the course to hitting that goal.
Yeah. So this is one way to do it. There's a bucket load of different ways. You can have budgets, you can use software. We also like Pocketsmith as like a personal banking tool as well. That can be a really good one to use as well. So make sure to find a way that works for you, and also think about a system to keep yourself accountable. Some people have a financial advisor for that. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's a friend, thinking about how you're going to have that accountability piece as well.
And if your financial advisor would pick up the tab for his own avocado on toast sometimes, maybe you get there quicker.
Yeah, actually, great tip. If you have friends who pay for things, you'll achieve your goals much faster. So KiwiSaver, as a financial advisor thinking about long-term, thinking about investing, the main reason I'm thinking about KiwiSaver is for your retirement. So you won't have New Zealand superannuation. Anybody under 50, I don't think will have New Zealand superannuation. You'll have to depend on yourself. But obviously the big focus today is around buying your first home. So Mike, when it comes to KiwiSaver, just on average, what percentage of the average deposit is KiwiSaver these days?
For first time buyer, at least 50%, I'd say. At least.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about your KiwiSaver, making sure that you're in, you've chosen a contribution level, you're thinking about what provider you're with, and you're thinking you're in the right fund are really important. The fund in particular is one I want to shout out, because a lot of people are invested in really high risk funds, but want to use their KiwiSaver in like 3 months to buy their first home. We saw what happened in March 2020 when COVID hit, what happened, and it was people's KiwiSaver balances dropped. Then people found out there wasn't enough money there to settle their home and ran into a whole bunch of problems. So you can have the aggressive fund once you buy your house, but please remember, if you've got a short-term goal for your money, that you should be more conservative. I'm going to touch on this very quickly. Somehow Mike let me have a plug in here for long-term planning. Now, just to give you an idea of the long-term, how big of a difference the fund and the contribution level can make. I've got a few examples for you. Now, you might look at this and go, hold up, James, you have completely detached from reality. There is no 20-year-old earning $80,000 a year. That this is the average income of a 20-year-old across their whole working life. So it's not just, some ballers coming out from day one. If you're in a low-risk fund and you're regularly contributing to your KiwiSaver, though, and you're contributing 3%, by the time you're 65, you might have just under 600,000. If you're contributing 6% of your salary, you might have just under 900,000. But here's why it's so important to make an active choice of fund. Now, you need to be comfortable with the risks because it's not all roses and sunshine, but you can see those same levels of contribution in a balanced fund, and then an aggressive fund can have substantially different financial outcomes over the long term. Mike is thinking, I see aggressive fund, 10% contribution. That's what I'm going to do. Yes, Mike, I just stole your joke. Sorry about it. There are a lot of people can't tolerate those ups and downs, and you need to make sure that you're aligned with your goals. So especially if you are looking to buy a house soon, you should be thinking more towards that lower risk end.
Cool. So enough about funds and all of that sort of thing. Let's get on to house buying. So look, KiwiSaver is a great tool to buy your first home. There's a couple of things you just have to think about when you are looking at it. So like James said before, if you're planning on purchasing in the next 12 months, really consider the fund you're in, because you don't want to get to a scenario where you are counting on that money being there and you're in a high risk fund and it's dropped off the edge and all of a sudden you can't settle the property. So there's a few conditions you need to look at when using your KiwiSaver. You need to have been contributing for at least 3 years. Now that doesn't need to be 3 consecutive years. You can do 2 years, and then maybe, I don't know, you go away London on an OE or something, can come back for another year. That will suffice for 3 years so you can use it for your first home. You have to be buying an owner-occupied property. You can't be buying an investment property, so you do need to live in the house. The last one, it has to be your first property. Now, there are some exceptions to this, but generally speaking, you can't use it to buy a second property or a third property. Cool. So those are the main conditions you've got to look at. There are some other minor ones in there, but there's more information about that online. There's 2 ways you can use it. So when you're using it for a deposit, you can either use it for a purchase deposit or a settlement deposit. A purchase deposit is a deposit that you pay straight after you either win an auction or your offer is accepted. This sort of usually needs to be paid 24, 48 hours after you've won or it's accepted. Now, a KiwiSaver fund can take a while to actually release your money and put it into cash. So you're going to need about 10 working days for this to happen. Now, if you're using that KiwiSaver money for a purchase deposit, you're going to need to give your KiwiSaver provider some advanced warning that you're going to do that. So they'll need to see some sale and purchase agreements, know that you're going to auction, know that you're making an offer or something like that. You'll also want to tell the estate agent this, because they might want you to put a clause in your offer or in the sale and purchase or in the auction agreement to say that your deposit might be a little bit late. So again, just make sure you give the estate agent a heads up and you give your KiwiSaver provider a heads up as well. The second way you can use it is its settlement deposit. Let's say you're paying a 10% purchase deposit up front after the auction, and then you're paying another 10% just before you settle the property, before you actually purchase it. Now, again, you just need to give your KiwiSaver provider a heads up here and some reasonable time that you're going to be you need the money on this date, your settlement date, because again, it can take sort of 10 working days to get it out.
If I could just add one point to that, which Mike has already said, but I'm just going to emphasize it. Please, please, please talk to your KiwiSaver provider early. Do not leave it to the last minute, because that can end in tears.
And they will say no. You get scenarios where they literally just say, we can't do this. You're going to have to delay settlement. It causes a lot of issues. So the first home buyers grant. Look, I'm going to touch on this really quickly just because not many people these days are actually qualifying for this. But if you do qualify for it, hey, it can be up to $10,000 that you get back, and you don't have to pay back to the government. So what is it? It is a grant that the government will give you to purchase your first home. Like I just said, don't have to pay it back. Really good. There are some quite tough conditions though to meet. So there's an income condition. You need to be earning under 95,000 for a single, 150,000 for a couple. Now that is a rolling average of the last 12 months. So if you just got 2 months ago, if you just got a pay rise to 100,000, chances are you'll probably still meet that 95K income condition. So just, something to explore there, but that is a cap that some people struggle to meet. How much is it? So it is based on how long you've been contributing to KiwiSaver. So for an existing in situ property, you'll get $1,000 per year for up to 5 years. So potentially $5,000 that you don't need to pay back. For a new build, so a brand new property purchasing off plans, or it's considered a new build, you'll get $2,000 per year for up to 5 years. So $10,000 that you don't need to pay back. Now, you might be looking at this going, Mike, that all seems pretty rosy. What can't I hit about this? What are these conditions I can't meet? There are regional house price caps which govern the price that you can spend or purchase for a property. For example, in Auckland, 700,000 for a new build property, 650,000 for an in situ property. They are different around the country. Auckland is the highest, they are lower in the regions. That is usually the main one that people can't hit. Cool. So buying a house. Now, I can literally talk about this probably for the whole day because there is a lot to chew through here. But
please don't, Mike.
What I'm going to do is just try and give you some really high level detail on it. And again, just pump those questions into the chat and I can answer a lot at the end. Now, we've talked about saving a deposit. James talked about KiwiSaver, the goals, the budgeting. So I'm not going to cover that. Organizing finance. Now, look, I don't know if there's one thing you take from today, let it be this. Please organize your finance early. It is heartbreaking for us when a customer comes to us and says, I want to buy this house, auctions tomorrow. We go, there's simply no way a bank's going to be able to look at that. It can't happen. And then the house actually sells inside their budget, so they could have bought it. That is really heartbreaking, especially for first-time buyers. Organize your finance early. Go see your mortgage broker, go see a bank. Probably now more than ever, I would say go see a mortgage broker over a bank because of the Cfa regulations. We are getting a lot of customers who just get declined from a bank, but they don't get told what they can do to sort of make the application work. So organize your finance early. I'll run through what that entails in a little bit more detail next. Once you've got that pre-approval is going to say to you, hey, look, you can buy a house for, say, $1 million and you can use a 10%, you'll need a 10% deposit and the house needs to be in Auckland or Wellington or something like that. Once you've got that pre-approval, you can then go start trying to actually find a house. We don't need to run through this too much. You can find them on Trade Me. Look up developers if you want to purchase off plan. I'll run through that in a little bit soon. What you will need to do, though, when you find the house is do some due diligence. Now, due diligence on the property comes in a few different forms. The first thing you want to do if you're using a mortgage broker is send the house or the details of the house to your mortgage broker. They will look over it first and let you know if there's anything that they can see that's wrong. The reason you send it to a broker over your lawyer is that your broker isn't going to charge you to do that. Now, the next thing you want to do if you're happy with that is send it to your lawyer so the lawyer can do due diligence on the property. They'll look at the title, the sale and purchase agreement, the limb. They'll tell you if there's anything wrong with that. You also probably want to get a building inspection on the house as well. So all of these can sort of start to cost a bit of money if you're doing it over and over again, probably about $900. Actually, probably for registered valuation, probably about $900. Building report, probably $300 to $400. And your solicitor, you probably want to budget $1,200 to $2,000, maybe a little bit more, depending on the firm you're using to get the whole buying process and due diligence done. So once the due diligence is done and you're happy with it, you can go to auction or make an offer. I'll go through that again in a little bit more detail in a bit. If you win, you have to pay that purchase deposit, usually within 24 or 48 hours. After that, you've got a bit of time between paying that deposit and settlement, usually about 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a little bit sooner, depending on what you're purchasing. During that time, you'll look at structuring the mortgage. So you want to have a really good chat with your banker or with your broker around what is the best products for you. Is it fixed? Is it floating? Do you qualify for a new build interest rate, which is 2.03%? Do you want someone revolving credit? These conversations need to be really detailed and super tailored to your scenario. General advice here is an absolute killer for people. You end up paying too much interest, not paying the loan off quick enough, or just generally, being in a worse position than you could have in 5 or 10 years. Once all that's decided, we get the loan docs out, we get them to your solicitor. You go sign them with your solicitor. They will run you through everything you need to know there. And then it's settlement days. So what we do is we exchange, your solicitor takes a deed of undertaking and exchanges the money for the titles, and you get your house and you get some keys. Now that is a very, very high level, very quick overview of the process. Again, keep asking questions as much as you want.
Yeah, Mike, I've got a couple of questions that I might ask you.
Yeah.
And that's a really good shout out is, I don't want to compare different businesses, but we definitely do judge you based off how many questions you ask. So the more the merrier. Please get those questions in nice and early, and we'll answer them at the end. The first question, Mike, I've got is, how do I know if I'm close or not? Like, say I've got a slightly more complex situation, or somebody's going to give me a hand, or I'm not sure if my income is enough. How do I work out if I should even bother starting this process?
Yeah. So again, have a chat to a broker or a banker. They can give you really good advice on how far away you are from actually purchasing. We can also tell you things like, quite often with your first home buyers, they may not have the deposit there, but we can do things like talk about getting a gift from your family member, and these sorts of things that really help you, get there a bit quicker. So we always look at what levers we can pull to get you into the home as quick as you can.
Awesome. Okay. I'll jump to this next slide, but then ask you a question before you start talking. Is there has been a lot of media attention around how hard it is to get a mortgage now, that, you spend $100 at Kmart, you're going to get declined. You've got to be hardcore with your expenses for 3 months. Firstly, what the hell is going on? Can people still get mortgages?
Yeah, I should put out a cookbook for people who want to get a mortgage, just rice and noodles. The new triple CFA regulations came in at the end of last year, and they fundamentally changed the way that banks sort of have to look at applications and what they can suggest. Previously, what a banker could do is say, hey, look, this is how these guys are spending now. When they buy a house, they will change their sort of spending habits. So they won't go out so much. They will not buy lunch every day. They'll have a coffee in the office instead of going out and getting one, because people inherently do that when you buy a house. They can't do that anymore. A banker can't make that suggestion to their credit team. That needs to be presented to them. So what that sort of means is that people are just getting flatly declined, and you're seeing those sort of horror stories about, they said that I'm getting Uber Eats once a week and that's too much, or I went to Kmart and these sorts of things. Yeah, they're picking specific transactions, but the general theme is the same. The information you present to the bank now needs to be spot on when it's presented to them. The banker can't make recommendations really anymore about how to get the application approved. So, yep, absolutely, you probably need to trim your spending a little bit, but it's about getting the information correct the first time so the banker can't turn it down.
Yeah. And once again, have the conversation with a mortgage broker so you can find out where you are and understand how big the changes are. Mike, I'll ask you one more question before you jump into organizing finance. A lot of people say, hey, house prices have gone up pretty much 50% in 2 or 3 years. Is now still a good time to buy a house, or should I wait for there to be a market correction?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to say that now is probably a good time to buy a house, because these aren't assets you're holding for 2 years, 3 years. You're not trying to time the market here. You're going to be holding this house for 5 years, 10 years. You're going to be on the property ladder in the market, as opposed to just, we're not day trading these houses. I'm always going to say get on as soon as you can. Over the long term, property generally trends in one direction. Also keep in mind there's a finite amount of land and an infinite amount of people on the way. So, if you just look at that scarcity of resource, you can sort of get a picture there. I will just quickly say something before I jump into organizing finance. You touched on there. We don't usually in this webinar just talk about brokers. We talk about bankers quite a bit as well, but the sentiment has sort of changed with the triple CFA regulation, where now I more than ever sort of think, even if it's not me, you should speak to a mortgage broker first, because they can get that approval right for you the first time. James and I have a really good example of joint customers of ours who are a doctor and an engineer, want to buy an investment property, went to the ASB, to their personal banker, and just got flatly declined. They then came to us. I went back to the ASB and got them 1.2 mil for the investment property. So same bank, same application, presented slightly differently, completely different outcome. I don't want to seem like I'm just pushing brokers, but it just, at the moment, until that triple CFA stuff eases up a bit, you're better off to speak to a broker.
Yeah, and I can give you the quick plug as well, Mike, is that And then, I mean, if you've got somebody you already work with, then that's great if they're doing a good job for you. But like the broker model is quite bizarre when you actually think about it. The bank will pay somebody outside of the bank, being the broker, to give you a personalized service at no cost to you. It's pretty good. And then you've got the ability to not just deal with your one specific bank, but look at, well, what bank has the right risk appetite for the right deal at the moment. So I definitely think it's worth using a broker.
Yeah, cool. Let's move on because I feel like we're advertising. I don't like that. Okay, so yeah, organizing finance. Guys, there's a few things written on this slide, but fundamentally, what is the bank looking for? They're looking for your deposit, your income, and your expenses. I'll start on the deposit side of things. You're probably going to need 10% to purchase a house. There are instances where you can do it with 5%, but those are really specialist loans that Kāinga Ora is in on as well. And not a lot of people qualify for them. So generally speaking, 10%, at least 5% of that needs to be made up from genuine savings. So KiwiSaver is a really good one for that. Again, remember with KiwiSaver, there's 3 parties saving for your house: your employer, you, and the government. So it's a great tool to use for your first home. I sort of mentioned before and did some air quotes about a gift from your parents. More often than not now, well, actually fairly often now, we are seeing the bank of mum and dad chip in for a first home. It needs to be gifted funds, which sort of means that we need a gifting certificate signed. Sometimes in the background, people have other agreements with their parents, but the bank just needs to know that it's gifted funds. There's a standard template we use for that. So they'll look at your deposit. If you've got 10%, we'll move on to the next thing, which is your income. They'll be looking at, are you self-employed? Are you PAYE employed? How much did you earn? Are you making KiwiSaver contributions out of that? How much tax are you paying? All of that sort of thing to ascertain your income. How long have you been at your job? 2 weeks, 2 days, 3 months, 3 years? All of that sort of factors in with the risk of your income. Then they're going to look at your expenses. So your fixed expenses. Do you have any debt? So do you have any credit cards? Do you have any personal loans? These sorts of things. Your variable expenses. So, how often are you going out, Uber Eats, those sorts of things? What are your sort of average running costs? And the banks have benchmarks for these as well. So unfortunately, if you're living off peanuts and spending nothing, they will still benchmark you at a certain level. After that, they take away the expenses from the income, and that delta there, what you're left with, or the net monthly surplus, is what the bank is looking at to sort of ascertain whether or not you can use that to afford a home loan. So that's really what the bank is looking at with a mortgage application. Now, again, there's 1,000 different things you can do to sort of present numbers in a better way there, levers we can pull, things we can sort of do. So just have a really good chat with your broker or your banker, well, probably not so much a banker anymore about that, but with your mortgage broker about what's the best way to present the information. Cool. So the purchase process. Now, I'm going to concentrate on an auction and purchasing off plans today, because those are two sort of probably the most common way that people are buying in the market at the moment. Now, an auction, you need to sign up to the auction ahead of time. Make sure the house is approved by the bank and your solicitor has done due diligence, because this is unconditional bidding, and your building report's been done as well. If you win the auction, you are expected to be able to settle the house. There is no conditions on this. It's if you win, you buy. You'll be bidding up until the reserve price is met. The auctioneer will then announce that it's on the market. And then after that, the house is good to go. It's ready to be sold. Now, at the moment, I am giving the advice to a lot of my customers that they should be putting in pre-auction offers. What a pre-auction offer is you go to the vendor, the person selling the house, a week, 2 weeks before the auction date is due, and you say to them, hey, I'll give you 1.2 million for this property, but you've got to bring the auction forward to 2 working days from now. If the offer is good enough, the vendor may agree to that and bring that auction forward. Now, what you're doing there is you're cutting out competition. You're cutting out probably a couple of open homes. You're cutting out people, giving the people chance to get their finance sorted, to do all of that sort of thing. So it can be really good in terms of a way to get an advantage on other people in the auction, as opposed to just going and standing in a room and putting your hand up. Again, keep in mind, you've got to pay that deposit probably within 24 to 48 hours of the auction. So if you're using KiwiSaver, give your KiwiSaver provider heaps of time, and also let the estate agent know as well. The next thing I'm quickly going to touch on is purchasing off plans. Now, this is another really good way to sort of buy a house at the moment, first home buyers and some investors as well. When you're purchasing off plans, you're going to a property developer. They have priced the property. Sometimes there's some room to negotiate. More often than not, it's not. It's a fixed price. You pay a 10% deposit and you get a house in 12 months. Now, why is this a really good thing? Let's say you've gone to 4 auctions and you've done your due diligence and you've got your builder's reports and your solicitors looked at everything and the bank's approved it. If you lose that auction and go to the next one, and then lose that auction and go to the next one, that can really start to rack up in terms of costs. So this can be a really good way to get a foot on the property ladder. Yep, you've got to wait 12 months for a house, but that actually gives you some time to sort of save a bit more money for the deposit and these sorts of things. The risk there is that during that time, either something goes wrong with the development or the developer, or the bank pulls their approval or something like that. And there are strategies we sort of have to get around both of those things. My advice for developers at the moment would be use a large developer, and one that has a track record. Go touch the house, call the developer and say, I want to go see a house that you have completed and I don't want it to be a show home, because I have never seen a bad looking show home. Make sure they've completed some houses, do your due diligence on the developer really well.
It is a very important point in the current market where everybody wants new build properties.
Everyone wants to be a developer.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, you have just run through so much. So my guy, take a breath. I've got it for a second. Everybody, make sure you're writing those questions. I see some really good ones coming through. Make sure to keep popping them through. So a few reminders, which Mike has touched on, I'm just going to emphasize again. First, start that conversation early with the mortgage broker, making sure that you're organizing finance early, understanding the road to get where you want to go. Building reports. If you are going to auction in particular, you may spend $1,000 on a building report. You may then lose that house at auction and go, there is $1,000 wasted. You might repeat that exercise 4 or 5 times and go, I really hate building reports. If you buy a house without a building report and it is a leaky home, there is a rotten wall, something has gone significantly wrong, it will be one of the biggest financial mistakes you ever make.
Yep.
It is an expense, just like a registered valuation is, but that's, when the bank requires it. The building report is an expense that is necessary during the process. Just make sure you don't end up with egg on your face. I completely understand how frustrating it can be when you continue to lose though.
Yeah, a building report's probably going to run you like 300 to 400 as to 1,000 though. But really, really funny story. I
got hoodwinked, Mike.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll do it really quickly. When I was looking for my first house, I remember we went and saw a house, and it kind of looked like not too good to be true, but I was like, oh, it's a bit of a deal. I wonder why this house is a deal. We didn't even end up going for it. But probably 12 months later, I was having a discussion with a couple, and they were like, the foundations are completely buggered. The house, we're not actually allowed to live in the house, and we need to sort of think about how we can structure some finance differently to fix the situation. And when I looked up the address, I was like, oh my God, that's that house. Like we were, yeah. So, and like, luckily they had a couple of houses, so it wasn't so bad for them, but I was like, man, if we bought that house, I would be, and they got a building report and it still went wrong, but because they got that building report, they have someone that they can fall back on who's liable for that. Sorry.
No, and without continuing to waffle on, because I'm very conscious of the time, I've gone and done a building report on a house, gone to action with a price in mind, watched another couple bidding on it with the mum next to them jumping up and down excited and gone, oh, they don't know what I know.
Yeah.
And you just don't want to be in that situation. Speaking of being emotional, avoid emotional buying. Make sure you do your research before you bid on a house. You are working out what houses are selling for in the area. What do the recent sales work like? And you have a plan when you get in the auction room in particular. Everyone loves an auction. They're exciting. The adrenaline's rushing. Mike could bid on houses at auctions as his full-time job if he was allowed to do it. You do not want to, the real estate agent turning around going, hey, you're going to really lose this house over $1,000. And it's like, no, it's not $1,000. I'm $51,000 over my budget.
Yeah.
So have a plan, be like the Terminator in there, and make sure that you've got, that you implement the plan. And if you need to walk away, there's always another house.
Yep.
Real estate agents are not your mates. There's some lovely ones out there, but their job is to sell the house for as much money as they can. Make sure you are doing your own research. And for those, I think there'll be some people on here from Wellington. This is particularly true when it comes to tenders. You want to protect yourself. You want to make sure you have the right due diligence, but the cleaner the offer, the better. Sometimes sellers will go for a lower price, but with less complexity in terms of the amount of time to settle and finance clauses, et cetera, So keep it nice and clean.
If I offer James 1.5 million for a house, someone else has offered him 1.55 million, but they've got to sell their house as a condition, chances are he's going to go, too much hassle, I'll just take the 1.5. The registered valuation piece, let me just quickly touch on that. If you have less than a 20% deposit, you're probably going to need a registered valuation on the house. If you're purchasing off plans, you're going to need a registered valuation on the house. If you're purchasing a property over probably 3.2, 3.5 mil, you're going to need a registered valuation on that house as well. This can get really expensive if you're losing house after house after house. So again, advice that a mortgage broker can give you that a banker can't is around some strategies around that. If you're paying a reasonable price for a reasonable house, a reasonable suburb, chances are the registered valuation is going to come in bang on what you need it to. We give the registered valuer the sale and purchase agreement that you signed with the price on it. Now, as long, generally speaking, there is some risk to that strategy, but if you are just paying, $900, $900, $500, $600, a lot of the time, we can start to look at that as a strategy to reduce that cost, but it is on a case-by-case, house-by-house basis, and we will explain what the risk of that strategy is to you as well.
All right, we need to get the show on the road.
Yeah, cool.
Holy tamale, we've still got these scenarios as well, Mike. Do you want to quickly run through these?
Okay, cool. I'll rapid fire this. So people often think they're quite far away from buying a house. Here's a couple of scenarios just to sort of let you know that you might be a little bit closer than you think. Let's say you're 27, your partner is 29, you earn 75,000, your partner earns 70,000. You've got a student loan, your partner doesn't. You're saving probably 500 a fortnight between you, and you've both been in KiwiSaver for 5 years. So if you're buying a $950,000 house, your deposit is $95,000. If your KiwiSaver is $35,000, your partner's KiwiSaver is $25,000. Let's say you got savings of $35,000. That makes up that $95K deposit. So you like I sort of said, the power of KiwiSaver there is a really good thing. The other reason that I love it, apart from 3 people saving for one house, is that you don't see that money in your account. You cannot touch it, which is super powerful. So singles. Now, look, when we run these webinars, quite often sometimes we get people saying, hey, you didn't focus on the singles as much. Look, it's exactly the same sort of math. It's just that everything's a little bit more expensive. So let's say you're 27, you're earning 100,000, you don't have a student loan, you're saving 500 a fortnight, you've been in KiwiSaver for 7 years. 10% deposit on a $675,000 house, $67,500. Let's say your KiwiSaver is $37,500 and that savings is $30,000. That's going to get you there. You're probably looking at me going, that's a really cheap house. We have based these off actual houses. This is a house from a development in Massey. It's a 1-bedroom, 2-level townhouse. So these houses do exist. They are out there.
That was very quick, Mike. Now, that is a lot of house stuff. I'm going to wrap this up with being a responsible adult. So the first thing is when you buy a house, it's a pretty big commitment. So number one, when you go and talk to that solicitor and you're spending some money, spend slightly more money and get a will. Make sure there are nice, clear instructions with this big mortgage and this big asset you've got that you're going to be okay. Secondly, you might go, well, now I've got a big asset. Spoiler alert, your biggest asset still isn't the house. It's your income, it's your ability to earn in the future. So there is a balance with this. You don't want to be overinsured and spending too much money. But if you are in that single category, you're going to want to have income protection. You're going to want to make sure that if you get sick or something bad happens to you, that you're able to continue to have your income paid through and that you're able to meet your obligations, stick on track with your financial plan and keep paying that mortgage. if you are in a couple or you've got dependents or something along those lines, life insurance should be the other part of the equation. If you have taken on as much debt as Mike can possibly get you, you need to make sure that if you're going down to one income because the other person's unfortunately passed away or got sick, that you can still maintain that mortgage. You can think about what your plan looks like. So we do life insurance and income protection. There's lots of other places that do it. You want to make sure that the insurance levels make sense. You're not getting sold to, you're not getting overhyped. But unfortunately, these things do happen. And I know it's a relatively young crowd at Xero, but you're not bulletproof. For a 30-year-old couple, there's a 25% chance that one out of a couple will be disabled for 6 months or more. And there's an 18% chance that one out of a couple will die before 65. So Don't worry, we'll build you back up before we let you go. This is the sobering part, but really important that you've got the good foundations of a financial plan, the foundations to a house, if you will, that when the storm comes through, that you'll be okay.
Yeah. And hey, look, guys, if you're doing a mortgage application now, the bank or your broker will have to make sure that you've covered this off, not just to protect our own backs, not just to try and upsell you something, but, unfortunately, we also see the flip side of this, where people maybe don't assess their risk position in a way that is, probably necessary. And then they come to us and sort of say, can you fix this with the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff? And it's not fun. And it's not, this isn't once or twice. We see this more often than you would think. Cool. So key points from today: have a plan, set those goals, know your numbers, know where you got to get to, budget, know how you're going to get there. Please organize your finance early, chat to your broker, chat to your bank. I don't care. Just talk to someone and get that finance organized as soon as you can. Because banks take 2 weeks sometimes to get a mortgage application approved. KiwiSaver. Again, this is a really good tool for saving for your first house. You are saving, your employer is saving, the government's chipping in money. There are 3 people helping you save here, and you do not have access to it, which is absolutely crucial if you're someone like me, which James has probably alluded to, that I like spending a little bit.
Cool. So the question, if you need advice on taking the next step. So, as you can see, this is not like a sales pitch webinar. This is really focused on you and you getting ahead. Some of you might want to have a chat to us afterwards. So we'll send out a link in the email later on today with, as I said, the survey, but also a link to book a one-on-one time just to talk through your situation. You might just have some kind of more general high-level questions. You might be wanting to have a more serious conversation with Mike about the mortgage, maybe me about your insurances. So we'll send those out after today. Speaking of help, you might go, we're on YouTube, there's this thing called checks and balances. So we are all about, as I said, financial literacy plus action equals financial freedom. So today is part of the literacy bit. Hopefully after today, you take some action, but there's only so much we can talk about over an hour. So you'll notice on this YouTube channel, there is like 60 odd videos, either talking for 15, 20 minutes about different money topics. So today we've got one coming out about the recent volatility in the market. And we also do money bites. So Mike explains what a revolving credit is and one that's recently come out. There's bunches of those. So to help us out, since you're here, it would be great if you subscribe to the channel to give us a bit of support. And then also so you can come back and watch some of these videos later on.
Yeah, and the money bite stuff, if you're purchasing your first house, is really good, because people quite often are scared to ask questions in a scenario where they think they're going to look stupid. So, asking or just learning, what is a revolving credit? What is loan to value ratio? What is a pre-approval? How much deposit do I need? What is the jargon and the terms that people in banking and finance use to sort of, make it far more complex than it actually seems? Yeah.
Right. Okay, Mike. So we are on to the Q&A now. So we've got a few questions to go through, and then anybody who is still on, we've got about 50 people still with us, jump in those questions and we'll keep going for as long as we can. First thing Luke has mentioned, referring to you all as Xeros, which that's a pretty cool name. Cool. He's just said, just a reminder that everybody has a free Xero subscription, so you can connect it up to your bank feeds and create your own personal budget. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool.
Bridget's asked a question saying, which out of cash or conservative fund for my KiwiSaver would you choose if you are currently actively looking to buy? So it's probably a bit of a risk thing. I would probably always say go to cash for the meantime and then change later on. If you wanted to be in a conservative fund to try and get a slightly better return for while you're looking, just remember that a conservative fund during like the global financial crisis dropped about 5%. So if you just have to be comfortable with that level of drop. If you're in a conservative fund, I'm not too bothered by it. If you're in like a growth fund, that's where quite a lot more risk lies, because that could drop 20, 25%. Mike, question from you from Joshua. At what point do you cancel the credit card if you're planning to do so? 3 months prior to settlement or at settlement?
Yeah, cool. So if you need to cancel the credit card as part of your loan conditions, you want to get that, again, it sort of depends on the approval. You want to cancel that probably, I'd say, at least a month before settlement. Tick that condition off, because what that means is that you still need time for the bank to assess that condition as being met. You still need time to produce the loan documents and that sort of stuff. So I'd say you probably want to give yourself about a month before settlement to do that. If you're talking about it from an approval perspective, if I've got a credit card, do I cancel that before I go and get the approval? Not really. We can condition for that, because what you don't want to do is close off a credit card, the bank doesn't give you the approval. So what we will do is probably say to the bank, yep, just condition for Joshua's credit card to be closed so he can get X loan.
Great. Okay.
I can't see the questions. Usually I have some sort of runway where I can read them coming up, but this is all.
I've got them here on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
Luke has asked one, with the CCCFA rule changes, any particular expenses that get clamped down on more? For example, what about a car lease?
A car lease isn't really anything to do with the CCCFA. A car lease is a fixed expense. So when banks look at expenses, they look at your fixed expenses versus your variable expenses. You'll probably notice I didn't mention other debts when I was talking about the three things a bank look at, which is deposit, income, and expenses. Because those debts, like a credit card or a car lease or a personal loan, that's just a fixed expense that the bank is looking at. Yeah, it's a different type. It's a little bit more risky than, I don't know, like rates or something, or rent or something like that. But really, that's all it is. So that isn't looked at any differently under CCCFA. The expenses that the CCCFA is now sort of impacting are your discretionary expenses, which they can't call discretionary anymore. So things like your subscription. Subscriptions. So like Netflix, Neon, those sorts of things, Sky TV, gyms. The bank used to be able to say, if they got into trouble, they could cancel these. Or once they buy the house, they will cancel these to reduce their cash going out. They can't say that anymore. They need you to either live like that beforehand, or they need that information presented to them up front.
Awesome. The other one, Mike, I'd be keen to hear, which I don't think you and I have, interestingly enough, spoken about. What about for those that regularly invest into like an index fund? So say if I'm putting $100 a week into my index funds or into my Sharesies account, does the bank treat that like an expense?
Yes, under CCCFA, that is treated like an expense. So examples there are regular contributions to an index fund, Sharesies, savings, regular contributions to savings as well, tithing, if you are regularly contributing to a church. The bank used to be able to suggest that would stop to be able to afford the house. They can't suggest that anymore. Your mortgage broker, your application, or you need to tell the banker, if you're doing it yourself, that you will stop that going forward. Otherwise, they will take it as a fixed expense. That's a really good one, because quite often that can lead to a decline, even though what you're doing is savings.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers. So is that one where you can like stop for 3 months, get the house, and then if you wanted to start contributing to an investment again, you could do it down the track?
Yeah. Once you settle a house, you can start rock and roll again, as long as your cash flow is fine. The one that the banks are a little bit tricky about at the moment is tithing, because people are often very reluctant to stop that. So if you are regularly contributing to a church and you're going to say that you're going to stop, the bank might actually put a condition on that they need to see you have stocked that in the lead up to settlement before they'll draw the loans down, because sometimes quite often people say they will and then they don't with that one.
Yeah. Next question is a really good one from Tessa. How difficult is it to get a mortgage based on a 10% deposit opposed to a 20% deposit?
It depends on your income. So additionally, with a 10% deposit, you'll get what's called a low equity margin. So if you have less than a 20% deposit, you'll pay a margin on top of the interest rate. So let's say the interest rate is 4% for 2 years, you will be paying 4.25 or 4.75. Now, what that does is they also add that margin to the test rate. So when a bank looks at an application, they go, yep, they can afford it at today's rate of 4%, but they can also afford it at tomorrow's rate of 6% or 7%. That low equity premium is also added to that test rate as well, which can actually reduce the amount you can borrow. So how much harder is it to get that lending? Depends on your income. Yes, the banks have, the Reserve Bank has tightened how much lending can be in that over 80 space now. But if the fundamentals of the application are there, you should still be able to get it.
Great. Okay. How about the idea as well, Mike, on so I have to pay a higher interest rate if I've got a 10% deposit. Yep. Should I wait and save more money to get to a 20% deposit so I don't have to pay the higher interest rate?
Probably not, I would say. And again, that's a general probably not. Everyone's situation might be slightly different. I would say probably not, given the recent house price growth. If you get in the market and the market's growing at 20% per year, what you can actually do is put the loans on short-term fixed rates, maybe a 1 year, someone floating, something like that, revalue the house, because the house price will go up, which means actually although you don't have more cash as a deposit, because the house prices increase, your loan to value ratio has come down, so maybe under 20, and you can save and just start really chipping away at that loan as well. We put them on shorter term interest rates or cheaper interest rates during that period, because my advice to you will be pay as much of this loan down as quick as possible to get you under that 20%. So generally speaking, no, but everyone's situation is slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's a good general rule, is that it's always just riskier when you're out of the market.
Yep.
Next question here is, when buying a new from a developer, do you only pay the deposit in 12 months once the property is completed? What insurance do you have if something goes wrong during the development?
Yeah, cool. So buying from a developer, usually you will pay 5% or 10% deposit up front as soon as you sign the contract. Now, there are 1,000 different ways that these contracts are cut, depending on the developer. I'm just going to refer to turnkey new build properties from reasonable sized developers. So the likes of Williams Corp, GJ Gardner, I don't know, people like, Wolfbrook, the big guys. You'll pay that 10% up front. That is your purchaser deposit. That deposit sits in their solicitor's trust account, doesn't usually go to the developer. You don't pay anything usually until the house is built and settled and the code of compliance is issued. After the code of compliance is issued, you have 10 working days to settle the property. That's when you'll pay everything else. So you pay the 10% up front. If you are contributing more, so let's say you've got a 20% deposit, you pay the rest of that deposit, so the other 10%, on settlement. So you get to retain those funds, keep them in the bank, keep saving, all of that sort of good stuff. What insurance do you have? Your deposit should be sitting in a solicitor's trust account, and if it all falls over from the developer side, you should get it back. I'm saying should a lot here, because there are a ton of different developers out there, and some of them build really pretty houses that never get built. And yeah, if you go to a big guy, a trusted developer, you don't have a lot of any insurance as such, but if they've set it up in a reasonable way, you should be getting your deposit back from their solicitor because it sits in their trust account.
Yeah. Where is the money stored? What happened? Because even big guys, they have settlements that get stopped at council or whatever it might be. You need that assurance.
Yep.
Really good question. Another one from Bridget. Any tips for finding a solicitor who can turn things around fast enough to make a pre-auction offer? Yeah,
it's going to depend on your relationship with the solicitor. Like, James and I generally work with one law firm, that's Hague Lyon, by the way, because they have a really slick property team there, and we have a relationship with them. So that means I can call up one of the partners there and go, hey, I need this turned around now. Would you mind doing it for me? So it's just about your relationship with the solicitor. I would say what's probably more pertinent is getting a solicitor that is a specialist with property, as opposed to just a generalist, because this is a really large transaction. It's a lot of money. Yeah, it might cost you a couple $100 more, but just let's say you're spending $2,000 to get on your solicitor to get this woe to go completely done. If you're spending $1 million on a property, $2,000 is, I know it seems like a lot, but it's not heaps compared to the amount of the value of the transaction. So yeah, depends on your relationship with the solicitor. They still have their deadlines that they have to work to, but just if you've got a good relationship with them, you should be able to get a pre-auction offer turned around pretty quickly. It's more the bank that I would be worried about getting a property approved quick enough to get the pre-auction offer in place.
Cool. Another question from Sophia: when figuring out a budget for post-purchase, i.e. the life where the bank owns you for the next 30 years, on average, how much should I be budgeting for mortgage repayments? Or is this a more personalized question, Mike?
No, so there's a ton of good calculators online that you can sort of look at. The ASB have a really good one just on their website. Westpac has another really good one, although I think that one struggles with interest-only repayments. So just go online, punch in the amount. It'll tell you exactly what the mortgage repayment's going to be. Other things, and that'll tell you, if you're fixed for 2 years on 4.2% or something, you've got that budgeting certainty over 2 years. So just punch that in and that'll tell you. The other things that I would probably consider there, though, just to think about with the budgeting, are things like rates and the other household insurances that come along with owning a house as well.
Cool. Amy has asked, any recommended apps or resources for budgeting with saving for a mortgage and costs, insurance, legal support, etc.?
PocketSmith is great for saving. We recommend that to a lot of our customers for budgets and that sort of stuff. Everything else you sort of mentioned there, sorry, I can't see it, so I'm trying to do this from memory. Everything you sort of looked at there are kind of variable costs to do with the house, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the house that you actually buy as to what those costs are. But yeah, PocketSmith's a really good one for saving and budgeting and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the one I would recommend as well. There's lots of good articles and those sort of things. The only other thing I'd say as well is if you want to do your research, that's great, but also have that conversation with the mortgage broker to get a more personalized view. Luke said he was really surprised about the regular investments would be considered an expense, so that was really good to know. A question: does all this work pretty similar when buying land and building a house, Mike?
No. Similar to a degree, I guess. You're still buying a piece of property. A couple of things with land, depends where the land is, what that land looks like, are there services to the front gate, that sort of thing. If you're just generally buying a block of land, I don't know, like Auckland or a major centre somewhere, and it's a residential block of land, and then you're building on it, the land portion is fine. You can purchase up to 80% of that usually. If you're building a house, though, as opposed to a turnkey contract, it is a little bit trickier. So again, that's going to be case by case on the build contract. Usually what this looks like is you pay a deposit up front, or you purchase the land, pay some deposit up front, and then there's staged drawdowns. So when the slab goes down, when the walls go up, when the house is closed in, when the kitchen's finished, like all these sorts of things will require staged drawdowns so you can actually pay the builder. Variations often can cause issues here. If there's delays and variations, the bank do not like that. We've all seen grand designs. We want to know what happens.
Great show.
Yeah, especially when they're like, oh, I'm going to manage it. I'm a doctor. And you're like, oh, okay. What the hell is this going to end?
Sounds like every doctor at the moment wanting to become a developer.
Yeah, absolutely. But then the other thing to just consider there, and probably the bigger one, because again, everything else is going to be contract specific, is your bank is going to expect you to be able to afford a 10% cost overrun. So if it's a $700,000 or $500,000 build, you're going to need to be able to afford another $50,000 or $70,000 loan on top of that. That actually does make a really big difference if you're pushing yourself right to the edge of your affordability. And the reason they do that is because, like on grand designs, there is always a cost overrun more often than not, and you need to be able to foot the bill for that.
Yeah, and 2 points there. One is that 10% these days with building inflation and the delays, it feels like it's getting even bigger. The second thing is, if you really, 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 really want to build your first home, okay, but we just see it go wrong so often. Buy a new build, buy an existing house. And this is probably another really good point, Mike, which we haven't touched on yet, is your first home is not your forever home. No. You just need to be on the ladder, so you get the benefits of the capital gains. You've got that peace of mind. You don't have to live in this house forever. So just something to think about there.
Yeah, I've never had a customer who's been like, man, building that house is I've never. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much you're spending. It sucks. Yeah.
Last question, unless we get another one before we finish this one. What are some things to keep in mind if you want to move out of the big city to the regions? Are there many common trip ups working historically?
Yeah, cool. So the first one to consider is just your income. Is it transferable? So if you're an office-based role, you can work remotely, that should be fine. That's the big hurdle that you got to cross with the bank. If you have to go into the office, or your partner has to go into the office every day, or the workshop or something like that, that causes a little bit of friction, should we say, with the bank, because they're like, well, hang on, we're giving you a loan to live in Christchurch. You currently live in Auckland, or I don't know, call it anywhere in New Zealand. Live in Christchurch. You currently live in Auckland. Do you have a job lined up there? If not, it can be a little bit of friction. So again, it's just about presenting that to the bank in the right way. If you have a completely transferable job and your income isn't going to change, that's not really much of an issue. We may need that confirmation of that from your employer, but again, so long as that's the truth, then it should be fine. Another couple of things to consider there. Just think about, I guess, if it is your first home, what does that mean for you in terms of like friends, family support, that sort of stuff? If you're starting a family, that sort of thing. I know these are wider issues, but again, this is something you should probably consider. And then if, think about maybe the capital gains, if that's something that you're focused on. If you're buying an investment property in somewhere that doesn't have as good capital gains, or maybe isn't as easy to rent out, you probably need to consider that as well.
Cool. Okay. We've got another question, Mike. When looking at new builds, is there a better one to look at out of townhouses and apartments? Exceptional question. Mike, go for it.
Yeah, let me hit you with this. Cool. So there's a really good article that Westpac did on this, and this was just your standard Kiwi freehold in situ house versus townhouses versus apartments. Now, better or worse is a subjective thing. I can tell you that the capital gains on townhouses and houses track pretty similarly. You're probably going to, it'll be a little bit underneath it, but you're still going to get a fairly similar growth rate in terms of the value of the property. The thing probably to consider is that apartments don't track the same. James and I have a customer who, with his partner, bought an apartment in Auckland City about 7 years ago. They are still trying to sell it for pretty much the same that they bought it for, and there's not many bites on the line at the moment. So, if you're looking at it purely from a capital gain perspective, because you own the land underneath you, it's a grounded security, a house or a townhouse is going to get you better capital gains. Now, but what you said was, is it better? Again, that is subjective to your situation. An apartment may be better for you because it is more affordable. It may be closer to work. It might just be more convenient to your lifestyle. It may mean, again, that you are not paying someone else's mortgage, but you are paying your own mortgage. So you are living in that property and you are on the ladder. Things to just consider with apartments is body corp. So some of them might have ridiculous body corp fees and these sorts of things that can reduce the amount that you can actually borrow. Some apartments, if they're under 50 squares, have really low LVR limits on it. So you might only be able to borrow 60% of that property. And then final thing to consider with apartments is please, please, please don't buy a leasehold apartment. I've never seen it go right in the long term. It inevitably just turns to crap because you end up in court with your the person who owns the ground underneath you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I think we are all done. So pretty good job, guys. Lots of really good questions. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got a webinar tomorrow, which is paying down debt and growing your wealth. Make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel and see some of the other stuff that we're putting out to help you with your financial literacy journey. And we'll see some of you one-on-one or maybe even tomorrow. Bye.
Good.